People cheered. Oversized scissors gleamed. Vendors waved, but one wouldn't meet my eyes. That told me more than any glossy brochure. A heavy spool rolled across the gangway and parked like a truck no one wanted to admit was there. A generator thumped behind the cabin. None of it said pilot. All of it said permanent feed. I took a single photo, posts and cones in frame, so later no one could claim scale was just my opinion. That's when Elliot slid up beside me. A quiet neighbor, not much of a talker. He held out his phone, an insurance certificate, dates, limits, endorsements, and one bold exclusion block, hazard not covered. He didn't need to explain. Proof cools tempers faster than words. I saved the page in silence. Darla circled back, praising the gentle design. She called the posts light touch. She called the structure reversible. Then she slipped and used one word. Anchor. I almost laughed. I coughed instead. The timber under my boots didn't feel reversible. It felt wedged, stubborn, like it was here to stay. I could hear the planks complain in that thin, steady way wood does when it's carrying more than it should. I wrote it down, so later no one could sand the edge off my memory. The lawyer closed with one last reminder. Cooperation. Access. Enforcement is a last resort, but available. Heads nodded. Questions stayed buried. Someone asked about boat lanes. The gap looked tight. Too tight. The breeze traced a map in ripples, narrowing right where the gangway pinched the channel. Again, nature was pointing. The program tried to look the other way. I held that picture in my head the way a pilot holds a line at dusk. A neighbor turned to me. "What's your problem anyway?" I told him. I love the lake and the rules. In that order. He called me stubborn. Maybe I was. Maybe I was just reading too much into bolts and braces. But the plank under my heel flexed, cooling my doubt. The wood itself was talking. I took a breath, took a photo, and let my pulse settle into the lane where numbers live. And noise eventually gets tired. Darla handed me a glossy flyer, one-pager, all polished up. She smiled big and said, "The science team is thrilled." I asked her straight, "What's the shoreline permit number?" She shifted, still smiling. "The process has layers. Trust me." Trust? Trust works best when it stands on more than just a smile. I kept my tone flat. "Show me the number." She promised to follow up in writing. That promise had perfect posture, but no answers. The tour rolled on like a kitchen demo. Sensors, values, pride. Nobody mentioned the second bracket. Nobody mentioned the humming conduit. I let the words wash over me. Like a wake, it fades. But the timber beneath my feet? That told a story that stayed. Elliot texted me later. Sent that insurance certificate again, with 2 words. "Keep this." Quiet help matters, when noise tries to do the heavy lifting. They wrapped the day with talk of unity and shared goals. Fines were mentioned again, softened this time. Disruption will be documented. The message hung like a thin cloud overhead. I took a long breath. Fear makes you rush. Patience makes you careful. I chose patience. A volunteer waved me off the dock so they could clear the lane. Darla thanked me for being a long-time resident. It landed the same. "Way you pat a dog that won't roll over." I asked for the permit. Again, "The board will handle details," she said, which was no answer at all. I walked the shoreline, while their speakers looped some hopeful tune. Lake ignored it. The wood beneath me spoke only of weight where there should have been drift. I framed the bracket, in my camera with the cones, so later no one could twist the facts. Paper likes pictures. It doesn't argue like people do. When the crowd thinned, Darla pulled me aside. "Jason, be reasonable. We don't want trouble. Stand down and everything stays smooth. Stand down tastes like chalk." "I can be reasonable all week," I told her. "Just show me the basics." "Not every detail belongs in the open," she said. "Some details need more light than others," I answered, keeping my voice low. The water behind us rippled. Answering for me, a resident asked about money. Darla said, "Partnerships and community spirit" covered the cost, but the banner still screamed $7 million. "Spirit doesn't pay for conduit," I muttered. She backpedaled. "That number means value, not price." Neat trick. Value. Makes for a good costume when no one wants to show the bill. I didn't argue. What I wanted was simple. A timeline, a permit, and a clear chart of what was touching my water, and why it thought it could. One of the workers lifted a deck skirt with a pry bar, saw me watching and dropped it fast. He tried to change the subject, asked me about trout. Trout like shade, I said. But they hate snags. He laughed too hard. His partner studied his boots. The plank groaned again. Thin, sharp. Not a sound I liked. I counted anchor bolts and wrote the number down. Numbers sleep better on paper than in memory, or in meetings where applause drowns out math. As the day wound down, the crowd packed up. The spool rolled back to a truck. But the cones stayed. The generator stayed. I lingered at the posts until the quiet returned. The wind traced a narrow path toward the gangway. The line on my screen stayed crooked, stubborn as truth. Paper will speak for wood. Paper doesn't get bored, and it doesn't change its story when the actors swap scripts. Darla told me again, "The community will decide." I answered, "The water decides faster." That's when she warned me, "Don't touch the utility. Escalation automatic." I slipped my phone back into my pocket and watched her walk away. The banner behind her still bragged $7 million. The lake didn't care. It just held steady, waiting for someone to stop performing and finally listen to the boards. I set one more marker by the willow so I could sleep. The next morning, I found a crisp envelope under my door. Courtesy update, it said in soft ink. The kind of letter that looked more like a wedding invite than a warning. Lawn height, bin hours, vehicle placement at the loop, and, tucked at the end, a polite reminder to respect temporary research access. I read it twice. It tasted like fog. So I called the shoreline desk and asked for Lena Ortiz. She picked up quick, no theater in her voice. Straight, clear. She wanted facts, not feelings. I could work with that. I told her what I had measured. Heavy bracing, warm conduit, a snag ring welded under the deck where no mooring belonged. She listened. She didn't rush me into a box she'd already built. Then she said she'd email me a classification tool. Just 2 pages. Quick check. 3 questions. Does the structure carry permanent load into land or posts? Does it draw utility power beyond portable sources? Does it narrow a marked or customary channel? 2 yeses meant callback. 3 meant file for abatement, simple on paper. Never simple at the waterline. When her message landed, I read it twice. My jaw unclenched for the first time in days. I walked to the dock with my notebook, GPS, and a marker. My hands still shook a little. I filmed the brace that carried more than temporary. I filmed the conduit that hummed steady. I filmed the cone lane that pinched the boat channel to a needle's eye. Then I sat on the step and breathed. Elliot found me there, like he had a compass for trouble. He handed me coffee. No speeches, just coffee. He pulled out his phone again, showed me the same certificate of insurance. Limits, dates, endorsements. Hazard exclusion, bold as daylight. Then he said one line I'll never forget. It's like car insurance when you take the wrong ramp. You don't get paid to crash. I asked about a bond. He nodded, scrolled, and showed me the rider. Contractor named, project scope, performance bond amount. Numbers didn't matter just then. The promise did. If Lena's classification landed fixed and Hazard sat outside coverage, the weight of performance would move center stage. That wasn't joy. That was balance. Lena called me back later. Her tone was crisp like fresh paper. She had my photos on her screen. She asked me to walk her through the load path, from bracket to posts to shore. I did. She asked where the conduit fed, where the cutover would end if the generator left. I answered. She asked me to place a camera on the channel and show her the choke at midday. I did. A kayak weaving through cones told its own story. She sent me another file. Field verification template. Boxes for tide, time, visual cues, a short narrative that wouldn't balloon into a novel. 2 title cycles better than 1, she said. Not legal advice. Just habit. She could meet me next week for a walk, but paper would move faster than her feet. That template steadied me, like a level on a shelf. I traced the 3 quick check questions again with a thick marker. Dead load into posts? Yes. Utility draw beyond portable? Yes. Channel narrowed by gangway and cones? Yes. 3 black ticks. My pulse slowed. My head cleared. I took a photo of the sheet with my hand in frame. Date stamped. Slid it into a sleeve. Wrote the file name in block letters. Naming a thing turns fog into a fence you can lean on. Elliot stepped back, letting me work. Then he gave me one more line. If 3 boxes light up, you're not arguing taste. You're describing a condition. Adjusters speak that language. Boards pretend to. Until a stamp lands. He sent me the policy page scan, so I had the proof without the noise. Then he slipped away before anyone could call him my sidekick. That afternoon, the board sent me an email dressed in understanding. They thanked me for interest in community. Progress reminded me to avoid obstructing temporary. fixtures, and tossed in a tease about a compliance visit for grass bins, a boat trailer line that hadn't moved in years, administrative fog poured into a clear bottle. I added it to the stack. A paper pile grows a spine if you keep feeding it. That night, I drafted the abatement packet like I'd rig a mooring in a hurry. Short ropes, clean knots, no slack, photos, quick check, field notes, the kayak video threading the cone lane, the close-up of the warm conduit, the bracket plate, sentences kept plain. Power lives in simple. This, not a poem, not a sermon, just this. When you can point and say that, the room runs out of places to hide. On my way back to the cove, I counted my steps and named them after the 3 questions. Load, power channel. By the time I reached the gangway, my feet matched my notes. I put my hand on the rail. The wood was warm. The conduit hummed its quiet song. A boat nosed through the pinch, hesitated, then slid past because its pilot was patient. I thought about patience, and whether mine would hold through review. The lake was flat as glass, sharp as a mirror that never blinks. I set the camera for one last wide shot, then let the hush settle in. Somewhere, a screen refreshed and assigned my packet a number that would outlast moods. Abatement isn't revenge. It's alignment. You trim a sail so the wind stops fighting you. You cut a line so a boat stops drowning itself on a hidden snag. My phone buzzed with another board note, sounding friendly in the way a fence does when it leans into your yard. They had scheduled a discussion about pathways and neighbor cooperation. They'd appreciate my presence. I read it twice and set it down. My hands were steady. Clarity does that. I stood on the bank, watching the posts carry more weight than any pilot should. The quick check sheet in my pocket felt warm, like a small engine ready to start. I could feel the path opening, like a channel clears when a buoy shifts 2 feet to truth. The lake didn't grin. The lake never does. It just waited, patient as a judge, for the file to be complete. 3 boxes lit. 1 door wide open. Dusk folded over the cove like a room dimming its lights. I closed my truck door carefully, latch whispering instead of slamming. No porch lights, no engines, only water-licking pilings and a buoy chiming somewhere unseen. On the hill, a machine hummed louder than my heartbeat, then quieted like it remembered its manners. I slid a small camera from my bag, framed the gangway with the willow for scale, and set the lens low behind driftwood. A red dot bloomed steady in the corner of the screen. I took 1 breath, then another, and let the dock fill the frame, ribs and shadows. A chest with a rhythm of its own. A lamp flicked on in the cabin, then out, like someone tapping glass to test the dark. I waited until the silence felt natural again. On the far post, I chalked a thin mark where the waterline stopped. 1 sentence for the tide, lower than yesterday by half a hand. I tucked a sliver of bright tape where only a careful eye would catch it. Click. Still. Frame. Proof. I didn't write numbers, just left a chalk line for the morning to confirm or erase. Then a beam swept out from the cabin window. Slow, deliberate, like a scythe. It skimmed the reeds, found rocks, brushed my tailgate, then drifted across open water. The crew had clocked out, but the light hadn't. 12-count sweep. Pause. 10-count sweep. Pause. Somebody had set it to a rhythm, watching for movement. Fine. Rhythm works both ways. It guides feet as well as beams. I let it pass twice, then shifted when it looked at the willow instead of the rail. That's when I found the first tooth they'd hidden. Not a mooring. An anchor plate, welded eye, fresh steel, clean against the silt. A chain tugging toward the channel's backbone. No plan had ever listed that hardware. I filmed it close, lens kissing the surface so the timecode drank the same water. The chain hummed faintly, working, pulling. 2 steps along the edge, the deck whispered its complaint. Tiny ticks wood makes under bad weight. Then I saw their second trick, a dark plastic sheet, pinned flat between stones under the current. Not a nursery liner, a throat. It squeezed the flow sharp, tugging water fast beneath the dock. From shore, you'd swear it was natural. I crouched low, let the camera disagree. I thought about calling Lena, closed my mouth. Files move better over coffee, not panic. Evidence grows at night, when lakes confess. Pride wanted me to gloat. Discipline kept me kneeling. I set a second camera to catch both, the chain and the plastic throat, in the same frame. A shadow crossed the cabin window. Thin, quick. Darla's height, maybe. Or maybe just my mind making shapes. I logged the minute in my notebook, nodded to the willow like it could hold my place. I wriggled under the lip of the dock and braced my lens on a sandbag. The chain ran taut, belt and suspenders, 2 anchors hidden, pulling the raft tight. Scrape marks on the plate showed where a hook had bitten too hard. Fresh scars. I filmed them like a dentist charting bad teeth. Let the time code talk instead of my jaw. The cabin's beam swept again, close enough to bleach my face in its glow. I froze. Breath stalled. It slid past, drifted to the rocks, died out. I breathed like a man who learned patience on tides. A gust lifted the sheet, slapped it down with a wet smack. Someone was coaching water to hurry. I filmed 2 shutter speeds, one for the pins, one for the flow. Took a still that told both stories in one shot. The beam swung again. I moved between beats, slow and practiced. Sneaking didn't feel like mischief tonight. It felt like duty wearing dark clothes. My phone pulsed once. Elliot's message. Keep your head low. I slid it away. Let my pulse answer instead. I tucked a tile of reflective tape on the sheet's edge where the camera would catch it if they yanked it up by morning. The lake keeps receipts, if you ask the right way. I chalked another mark on the far post and froze as the light swept inches from me. It passed. The chain still hummed below, hiding its weight. I gripped the planks, remembering the night a skiff overturned here. 2 kids shaking in my arms. Silence isn't decoration. It keeps you alive when the lake decides to test you. I eased back, brushed grit from my sleeves, and made one more pass. The posts felt taller than yesterday. Fear always does that. Tries to look like authority. I retucked the flags deeper, left one camera behind to watch, and walked to the willow until the cove put on its old face again. The chalk line glowed like a quiet order. The chain hummed its careful arrow. The sheet shimmered like a bruise waiting to speak. I took one last wide shot, stitching them all into one clean thought. The beam didn't return. The night breathed steady. By the time I reached my truck, the mark on the pilings had dropped again, not by inches, but on purpose. The dock's note had changed. Lighter, like the lies were losing their grip. I dotted the scar for later, let the quiet settle into my bones. Patience can feel like courage when you let it sit long enough. I thought of calling the desk, left the phone in my pocket. Morning would take the clips, the chalk, the angles, and do what people can't do with speeches. Move paper. I synced the second camera's clock with my watch, nodded to the willow like it was a colleague keeping quiet, and stepped back from the water like a guest leaving a house still grieving. I slid into the truck, left the headlights off. The cove held its breath. My fingers found the saw's case, then let go. Not yet. Abatement had a script now, and it didn't start here. The cabin sat dark, the raft barely moving, flags hinting at tomorrow's fight. I didn't pray. I counted slow, steady like the tide teaches. Counting is its own kind of faith. It doesn't need witnesses. When the water hit that chalk line, the thing sitting in the wrong place would have to move. Morning didn't wait long to show its hand. On the sandbar, a wooden frame had sprouted overnight, looked like a classroom on stilts. Bright twine wove neat rows of fake plastic blades, trying to pass as seagrass. A laminated sign called it a restoration plot. From the road, it photographed like virtue. Up close, it felt like a costume. I pinched one blade. It snapped back too quick. The lake looked past it, the way a judge looks past glitter. A volunteer in a safety vest waved me away. "Sensitive area," he said. I pointed at the frame, then at the narrow boat lane pinched by the cones. Which part needs guarding more? The plastic lesson, or the channel choking down to a slit? He kept polite, kept quiet. He hadn't built this page of the playbook. I stepped back, took a still shot that framed both, the fake grass and the pinch point, in one rectangle. Any honest eye could read it. Darla arrived with her clipboard, microphone voice polished to a shine. She praised stewardship, thanked partners, called the display a living classroom. "Our lake will be a model," she said. "The region is watching," I asked. "Who signed a permit for a plot in the middle of an active lane?" She said, "Research under guidance." I asked, "Whose guidance?" She smiled, thanked me for my passion, and turned away. Smooth as a host. Neighbors nodded at words like legacy. Phones lifted for pictures. I opened my night notes and sketched what I'd seen. Hidden chain pulling the raft, plastic sheet squeezing flow, fake grass frame parked at the exit like a trap waiting for outrage. The headline wrote itself, "Owner Damages Restoration Plot." If nobody else would measure, I would. And I'd file where facts mattered, not where applause told stories. The wind traced a narrow finger right down the choke point. As I wrote, a skiff cut too close and caught the wake wrong against the fake grass. The bow slapped hard, the pilot thrown sideways. He cursed, yanked the tiller, barely missed smashing the posts. One plastic blade snapped off, bright green in the water. Darla gasped, then shouted at me, like I had willed the lake to shove him. Phones lifted higher. Neighbors whispered. My jaw tightened. Drama was free, but I stuck to angles and times. Facts keep calm when tempers boil over. On my way back across the bar, a rough wake slapped my skiff into a piling. My forearm ripped open, bleeding a clean line. The painter rope burned my palm, not fatal. Just enough to sting. A motor revved away. Careless? Maybe. Maybe not. I rinsed the cut, taped it from my kit, and counted 4 breaths. Anger wanted the wheel. Procedure took it back. The lake didn't accuse, didn't comfort. It just kept its beat, same as always. At the marina office, I asked for the notice board. The clerk slid me forms. Boxes big enough for facts. Notice to mariners. Drift hazard. Corridor map. I filled them out in block letters. Unsecured raft tied to hidden plates. Plastic sheet compressing flow. Public channel narrowed by markers. Decoy frame at the exit. Requested removal outside the breakwater. Short sentences. No adjectives. Pages that would still make sense when tempers forgot grammar. The clerk asked for coordinates and tide states. I read them slow, cross-referencing times from dawn, noon. Last light, stapled photo numbers to each line. She asked if leadership had been notified. They were present, I said. Presence isn't permission, she replied. Not unkind. Then she stamped the first sheet. The sound landed like a gavel wrapped in felt. Ink calms rooms better than speeches ever do. Elliot showed up at the marina, quiet as always. He set his phone on the counter, the same insurance certificate glowing on the screen. Endorsements neat. Hazard exclusion bold. Didn't need to say a word. A page like that explains itself. I carried a second packet to the county desk. A woman in a blue cardigan read fast, asked sharp questions. Did the frame flex? Did I log the video index? I handed her the stills and diagrams. She stamped the notice. The sound was clean, final, like chain taking honest weight. Back at the shore, I marked a drift corridor. Orange stakes from the gangway to the channel mouth. Flagging stretched across the water so even a sleepy pilot would see the lane. I took a high still for scale, matched it to the county map, then filed a copy with the marina. A patrol boat slid in for fuel. The officer read the notice, studied the pinch, and radioed his unit to stage outside the breakwater for the next low tide. My cousin tugged my sleeve, told me to come eat. This isn't your job anymore, she said. Work changes shape, I told her. The lake trained me to see what weight hides. She rolled her eyes, kissed my cheek, promised a plate under foil. I meant to keep that promise, but first, I filmed 3 angles built to survive a meeting. Wide from shore, mid from the gangway, close on a stake as a small wake licked past. Darla drifted back when the crowd thinned. Her voice dropped low. Do you understand how bad this will look if any part of the restoration plot is harmed? Residents are sensitive. The region is watching. I didn't flinch. The plot will be safe, if nobody points a raft straight at it. Stop talking like an expert, she hissed. I'm talking like a neighbor who's pulled kids and boats out of this throat, I said, her lips tightened. She promised escalation. I promised receipts. We both kept our tones calm. The clerk slipped my copies into a sleeve, handed me a receipt. Yes, I said quietly. Receipts are time-choosing sides. Out on the water, the patrol skiff idled near the mouth, bow steady like a teacher watching a hallway. The cones already looked smaller. The fake grass frame looked like a prop waiting for an audience. The tide ticked down the chalk mark, one honest step at a time. I slid another copy of the notice into the public box, the lid closing with a neat click. Then I raised the flags higher, so even at dusk the choke point would glow like a warning. I checked my bandage, flexed my hand. The sting had eased to a dull hum. In my log I wrote a single line, injury minor. Navigation unaffected. I don't record drama. I record facts that stay true when tempers burn out. At home, I spread the stamped pages on the table, wrote a plain checklist in thick pen. Cameras, chalk, chain, sheet, frame, corridor, pickup. I starred the parts now backed by numbers and signatures. Paper rarely comforts me, but that night it felt like rope, holding steady when the wind gets rude. I set a copy aside for Lena, one for Elliot. Then I saved the stills with names that read like a trail, not a poem. Evening turned the cove to glass. I filmed the chalk line against the falling tide, wrote the time in the margin. Tired finally found me, the kind that comes after weather and patience wear you down. I hadn't hunted drama. I'd just placed pieces where they belonged, given them stamps. The next move wouldn't be mine alone. The frame glittered on the bank like confetti after a party. The patrol light swept the mouth, steady as a period at the end of a noisy sentence. I stood there a while, letting the map in my head click into place. The corridor was live, the unit staged, the pickups logged. If anyone nudged the raft tonight, the flags would guide it straight to the breakwater, where hands were waiting. I packed my camera, checked the tape on my arm once more, and listened. The dock had stopped complaining, just a quiet honesty in its planks, like wood relieved of too much weight. The stamp had fallen. The door behind me closed. By noon, the file already had a spine. My phone lit up with Lena's voice, even in spare. "Review complete," she said. "The structure classifies as fixed, not temporary." Her words landed like clean lumber. She couldn't give legal advice. She didn't need to. She confirmed process. Abatement steps are permitted as described in your packet. Document the sequence. Mark the corridor. Notify the desk when the site is stable. I thanked her. Then I just stared at the water until its rhythm settled my nerves. Not long after, Darla showed up again. She carried a letter like perfume, waving it in the air. "Temporary stage," she read, "sweet as syrup. Optics matter. This cabin is a teaching tool, flexible and light." I let her finish, then pointed at the conduit. "A portrait isn't a tunnel. Wires still hum. Braces still carry. A stage doesn't need a house feed." The crew looked away. Even the cones seemed embarrassed. I laid out the plan in simple lines, cut only the flagged splices. Remove the funnel sheet. Leave lawful structure untouched. Set lead buoys through the corridor so nothing drifts blind. Hand off the raft to the unit outside the breakwater. Photograph everything, gaps, times, tides. "This isn't theater," I told her. "It's maintenance, returning the lane to what it's supposed to be." Dry words. But dry saves lives. I picked a small saw, checked teeth and cord, packed a marlin spike. Elliot walked beside me in silence. Somehow that steadied me. We tested the planks as we went, slow steps, listening to every seam. I chalked an X on the first illegal splice, then the second, numbered them in block figures, tied low flagging so the sun wouldn't shout. The plastic throat still shivered between its stone pins. I snapped a photo, chalk marks and sheet in one frame. A gull laughed like it had seen this kind of cleanup before. The lake didn't laugh. It just waited. I called the marina desk, read the corridor coordinates. The clerk confirmed my notice on file, logged the call. A patrol skiff slid near the channel mouth, idling like a sentry. "Neutral policy, observe only. No hand on tools until paperwork closed." The officer just watched. Lane, frame, flags, wind. When he finally gave me a small nod, it felt like a gate unlatched. I lifted the saw and drew a breath with the grain. The first cut sang low through the brace, steady in my wrist. The wood sighed, like a beam relieved of keeping secrets. I stopped short of the main span. The added tie went slack with a soft thank you. Elliot caught the piece with a loop so it wouldn't kick up drama. Nothing theatrical. "Just work, plain and honest," Darla shouted from the gangway. "Interference will be documented." I answered. "That's exactly what we're doing." She snapped. "The board will consider fines. The county will consider photographs," I said. Then I squeezed the trigger again. Sparks bit short and tame. The second splice surrendered. We pulled both cut ties aboard, tagged them with time and tide. I photographed the gaps where temporary weight had lied. The current changed its voice, subtle but real, like a throat finding its breath again. I knelt, slid a knife under the plastic throat. It fought, then gave. We rolled it tight, strapped it to a crate. The water eased. Elliot floated me a buoy. I set it at the first marker, then another at the bend. The corridor came alive. Dotted line anyone could read. A paddleboarder veered wide without a word. That said enough. We worked steady. Darla warned me about optics and donors. I said, "Water prefers open." She promised I'd regret it. "Regret belongs to people who hide snags," I told her. The lake already gave us that line for free. Her face hardened. She stalked off. I didn't bite. Didn't need to. The saw had its own kind of calm. The last illegal tie gave way. The frame loosened like a long-held breath. I called the water unit, read the corridor. The patrol officer confirmed the pickup window. He asked, "Any debris near the exit?" Only the decoy frame, I said. We'll drag it high on the bank. He thanked me flatly. Professional care comes in small voices. Elliot and I lifted the fake frame onto the skiff. Its plastic blades drooped in the sun. Darla asked if I was proud. Pride's not part of this, I said. Relief is, safety is, clear channels are. She warned. The region will judge you. I shrugged. The region can read. The patrol skiff hovered at the mouth, punctuation at the end of a noisy paragraph. I posted a placard, snapped a photo with flags behind it. The ring on the piling had dropped another thumb since morning. The saw cooled in my hand. Elliot bagged the shavings so no one could call them harm. I logged conduit temps with a heat gun. Wrote the number in words so the log would hold. The hum had faded almost to nothing. A stage loses its voice when the plug comes loose. By dusk, the raft floated light, like it had finally remembered it was supposed to drift. We set a bridle from the bow, clipped in a lead line, and eased it toward the flagged corridor. The patrol skiff shadowed us, slow and steady. No sirens, no shouting, just presence. That was enough. Neighbors stood on shore, phones raised. Some cheering, some glaring. Opinions always arrive faster than facts. I kept my eyes on the flags. The raft's nose swung true between them, following the dotted line like a kid tracing letters. The current took over just past the willow, sliding it toward open water. Elliot guided the stern with a push-pole, calm as if he were docking his own boat. The fake grass frame rode along, strapped high and sulking like a bad prop. At the breakwater, the patrol boat caught our line. Hands hauled it in, clipped a tow, logged the time. Done. Clean. No drama, no damage. Just a raft leaving the wrong place at last. Darla appeared at the rocks, voice sharp enough to cut rope. You'll answer for this, she snapped. Already did, I said, holding up the stamped notice. She shook her head. Donors will hate this story. I shrugged. The water will like it better. Phones caught every word. Fine. Words don't scare me when paper's already ahead. I chalked the tide mark one more time, took a still frame. The channel widened in front of me like a throat unclenched. Boats moved smoother. Even the gulls settled. The planks under my boots were quiet, no extra weight pulling them sideways. For the first time in weeks, the dock sounded like itself. I leaned on the rail, letting the silence wrap around me. Silence isn't empty. It's proof work got finished. Elliot handed me the tagged splice pieces, bagged and numbered. Evidence, not trophies. We stacked them neat in the bed of my truck. On the shore, the crowd thinned, leaving only a few stubborn stares and one child pointing at the open lane. Looks bigger, he said. Smart kid. He didn't need an agenda to see truth. The patrol skiff radioed one last line. Tow complete. Corridor clear. Those 3 words carried more weight than any speech. I packed my notebook, capped my marker, checked my bandage. The sting was gone. The lake rolled on, steady as always, ignoring us the way it should. Tomorrow, maybe another fight, maybe another letter. But tonight, the water breathed easy, and so did I. The next morning, my porch held another envelope. Same cream paper, same careful script. This one skipped the smiles. Straight to the point. Non-compliance. Subject to fines. Immediate review scheduled. I read it twice, then set it next to the stamped notice from the county. 2 voices, one louder than the other. Elliot stopped by with coffee. He saw the letter, chuckled once. Dry as driftwood. They're playing checkers, he said. You're already playing chess. I wasn't so sure. Felt more like I was just holding the line while the lake kept score. I walked down to the dock. The planks were still quiet, no strange weight humming through them. The flags along the corridor flicked gently in the breeze, pointing the way clear. Boats passed easy now. A fisherman tipped his cap. A kayak slid through without scraping plastic. The silence of safe water. It carries a calm you can't fake. By noon, Darla came marching with her blazer and clipboard. Her tone was syrup poured over steel. You interfered with sanctioned work, she said. I held up the county stamp. I followed abatement protocol. She frowned, tried to wave the papers off like smoke. You don't understand the bigger picture. Maybe not, I said, but I understand channels, tide, and what happens when people hide anchors where they don't belong. Her jaw clenched. She turned, calling to the handful of neighbors who'd gathered. "He's resisting progress," she said. "He's undermining community investment." A few nodded, a few didn't. Most just stared at the open channel, the easy passage, the proof. I didn't argue. Let the water do the talking. The tide had dropped another hand since morning.
I understand your
revealing the clean
position,
gap
but
where the
these
plastic
documents
throat had once
clearly
squeezed the
indicate a
flow.
different outcome.
Current moved free, easy as breath. I snapped a photo, date stamped, filed it in my log. Proof doesn't raise its voice. It just waits for the right desk to notice. Darla stormed off, promises of escalation trailing behind her like smoke that wouldn't catch. Elliot nudged my shoulder. "Keep your keel straight," he muttered. I nodded. Not much else to say. The lake shimmered in the afternoon light, wide open now, the way it had always meant to be. For the first time in weeks, I believed it might stay that way. That evening, the wind died down, and the cove turned to glass. For the first time in a long while, I sat on the dock without my notebook or camera in hand. Just listening. The boards under me stayed quiet. No hidden anchors tugging, no weight bending them out of rhythm. The silence was almost too loud after weeks of tension. A heron skimmed low across the water, landed on the far bank, and stood like it owned the place. Which, in a way, it did. My phone buzzed. Another email from the board, polite on the surface, sharp underneath. Words like hearing and compliance dressed up in soft phrases about community harmony. I didn't answer. Not yet. Paper had to meet paper. That's how real weight shifts. Elliot texted instead, just 2 words. Hold steady. I smiled at that. He had a way of boiling the noise down to ballast. The sun slipped behind the ridge, throwing long shadows over the water. The willow by the shoreline swayed, its branches brushing the tide like a broom sweeping up the day. I thought back to the first time I'd seen the conduit humming, the posts leaning, the plastic throat pulling water the wrong way. How easy it would have been to shrug, to let it slide, to tell myself, not my fight. But fights pick you, sometimes. And this one had chosen me. Now the lane was open. The water moved clean. Kids could paddle without hitting a hidden snag. That was enough for tonight. I leaned back, let the boards cradle me, and closed my eyes. The lake kept its own lullaby, steady as a clock that never lies. Tomorrow would bring more letters, more words like review and fine. But tonight, the proof sat in plain sight, a channel clear, a lake breathing free, and silence that no speech could counterfeit. I let that silence carry me home. Morning brought fog, thick, heavy, the kind that muffles even your own footsteps. I walked down to the dock slow, careful. The flags marking the corridor stood half hidden, little splashes of color poking through the gray. The water was calm, almost too calm. No hum from hidden wires, no unnatural tug beneath the planks. Just the lake breathing the way it should. For a moment, I let myself believe the fight was finished. Then I saw it. Fresh tracks in the sand by the willow. Boots, not mine, pressed deep from someone working in the dark hours. I followed them to the edge of the dock. The chalk line I'd left had been scrubbed off, wiped clean like it had never been there. Only they missed one faint trace under the rail. Enough for me to know. Enough for the lake to remember. I crouched low, touched the board, still cool, still dry. No new weight yet, but the intent was there. Back at the porch, another envelope waited. This one thinner, but sharper. Words like imminent review and expanded authority stamped across the top. Elliot stopped by before I'd finished reading. He didn't knock, just leaned against the post, arms crossed. "They're trying to rewrite the tide," he said. "Can't be done," I answered. He nodded. "But they'll burn ink trying." We stood quiet for a while. The fog thinned, and the channel showed itself again, flags bright against the pale morning. I thought about the erased chalk line, the tracks in the sand, the letter dressed up in threats. The lake doesn't send letters. It doesn't erase marks in the night. It just keeps score in silence, steady and fair. I made a note in my log. Chalk tampered, tracks present, corridor intact, plain words. Enough for now. The fog lifted fully, and the lane stretched wide in front of me. For the moment, It was still mine to protect. For the moment, the water was free. By midday, the sun burned through, sharp and hot, laying every board bare. No shadows to hide in. Neighbors wandered down one by one, curiosity pulling them like a tide. A few nodded at the open channel, but most kept their eyes on me, waiting for something bigger than proof. Darla arrived last, clipboard tucked like a weapon. Her smile was thin, her voice polished. "We've scheduled a formal hearing," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your actions will be addressed." I didn't answer her. Not right away. Instead, I walked to the water's edge, pointed to the flags dancing in the breeze. Boats passed clean through, no scraping, no stalls. Then I turned back. "The lake doesn't need a hearing," I said. "It just needs to breathe." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some looked away. A couple smiled, quick and guilty, like they'd been waiting for someone else to say it first. Darla's jaw tightened. "Your defiance has consequences." "Safety has consequences too," I told her. I held up my logbook. Photos, times, chalk marks, stamps, all stacked neat as stones. "This isn't defiance. It's record-keeping." Her smile cracked, but she covered it quick. The wind shifted, rattling the cones piled on shore, the ones no one had bothered to collect. They clattered like bones, out of place now that the channel was clear. A gull landed on one, squawked, then lifted off again, carrying the echo down the cove. Neighbors drifted back toward their porches, unsure which way to lean. Elliot stayed behind, hands in his pockets, gaze steady on the water. "Funny thing about hearings," he muttered. "They love stories, but stories without proof don't last long." I nodded. My proof was stacked, dated, stamped, and the lake itself, the best witness of all, was calm and wide. Darla left in a hurry, blazer snapping in the wind. The silence she left behind felt like victory, but I knew better. It wasn't over. It was just the intermission. The boards under my boots creaked once, not with weight, but with memory. The lake was waiting, same as me. The hearing notice came fast, too fast for comfort. A date stamped bold, barely a week away. I spread the papers across my table. Stamped notices, photos, chalk marks, tide logs. A trail anyone could follow if they cared enough to read. Elliot came by after supper, slid into the chair across from me. He didn't even glance at the pile. "You've already won where it counts," he said. "Feels more like round one," I muttered. He sipped his coffee, shrugged. "Doesn't matter how loud they get in a room. Out here the water tells the truth." That thought stuck with me. The next morning I walked the dock again, camera in hand. The corridor flags fluttered sharp, bright against the current. Boats moved smooth, no choke, no scrape. I filmed each pass, filed the clips under one simple name: Aftermath, clear. The boards under me carried only their own weight. No hidden hum, no chains tugging beneath, just the old rhythm I'd known since I was a kid. And for the first time, I realized something. It wasn't just about fighting off one cabin, one raft, one set of braces. It was about guarding the silence itself. That easy breath of the lake when nothing fake pulls against it. I leaned on the rail, let the sun warm my shoulders, and spoke out loud, though nobody was there to hear. This is the story I'll tell in that room. Not anger, not drama. Just this, the channel, open and honest. The water, breathing free. Proof enough. The week moved slow, each day measured in small checks. Morning, walk the dock, test the planks, film the flags. Afternoon, log tide marks, take one wide still of the channel. Evening, stack papers, double-check the order, no drama, no new tricks. Just quiet routine. Darla didn't come around. Maybe she was saving her voice for the hearing. Maybe she thought silence would make me second-guess myself. It didn't. On the fourth day, a boy paddled through on a beat-up kayak, grinning like the whole lane belonged to him. He waved, shouted thanks, and kept gliding. That moment said more than any letter ever could. By the fifth day, the gulls had claimed the cones piled on shore. They perched, fought, dropped shells on them, like the junk was just part of the landscape now. I left them there. Reminders of what weight looks like when it's out of place. The night before the hearing, Elliot stopped by again. No lecture, no advice. Just a small thermos of coffee and 3 words. "Keep it plain." I nodded. That was the plan. When morning came, I packed my folder neat. Photos, logs, stamps, notices. Nothing fancy, no extra words. The lake looked calm as I left. The channel wide, the flags sharp in the breeze. It almost felt like it was wishing me luck. But I knew better. The lake doesn't care about luck. It cares about weight, balance, truth, and that's exactly what I planned to carry into the room. The meeting room smelled like paper and old carpet. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, louder than any voices at first. Neighbors filled the back rows, some leaning forward eager, others slouched like they'd been dragged in. Phones at the ready. Always phones. At the front sat 3 board members behind a long table. Darla at the side, blazer crisp, smile polished. A lawyer beside her with a stack of binders tall as a child. My folder looked thin in comparison. That didn't bother me. Weight isn't about size, it's about truth. The chair cleared his throat. We're here to discuss concerns regarding shoreline improvements and potential interference by residents. Eyes turned my way. I stood, opened my folder, and laid 3 sheets on the table. Stamped notice. Corridor map. Tide log, no speech. Just pages. Darla started smooth. Her words sweetened for the room. Research cabin, community pride, 7 million in value, future generations, stewardship. People nodded. Phones clicked. When it was my turn, I didn't match her polish. I just spoke the way the lake taught me. Plain, steady, no drama. The structure wasn't temporary. It carried permanent load. It drew power beyond portable. It narrowed a public channel. I held up Lena's quick check sheet. The 3 black ticks clear as sunrise. 3 boxes lit. That's all. The lawyer tried to spin it. Talked about interpretations and community vision. I lifted a photo of the plastic, throat pinned under the current. This isn't vision, I said. It's obstruction. And obstruction turns accidents into headlines. Silence spread through the room like a slow tide. The chair asked about evidence. I slid the photos across, each dated, each matched to tide and time. Neighbors leaned closer now, some whispering, some frowning. Elliot sat in the back, arms folded, calm as stone. He gave me one small nod. That was enough. The board promised review, promised fairness, promised further discussion. But I could tell. Something had shifted. Not in their words, but in their eyes. They'd seen the proof. They couldn't unsee it. I gathered my thin folder, heavier now than any binder in the room. The lake doesn't attend hearings. It doesn't clap or argue. But it had already spoken. All I did was repeat it. After the hearing, I walked out into the evening air, lungs aching for something real. The room had been thick with words. Vision, stewardship, compliance. But out here the silence was honest again. Elliot caught up with me on the steps. You didn't blink, he said. Didn't need to, I told him. The lake already said everything. He grinned, faint and quick, then slipped away before anyone could call it support. That night, I sat on the dock, camera idle at my side. The planks were steady, their song back to the rhythm I'd known all my life. The channel lay open, flags neat, current free. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The board would stall, twist, maybe even threaten again. But the weight had shifted. Proof was in the daylight now. The lake doesn't shout when it wins. It just breathes easier, and so did I. Days passed. The board sent letters, stacking words on top of words, pending review, compliance action, reconsideration. I filed each one, neat, then went back to the dock. Boats passed smooth. Kids fished off the bank. A skiff glided down the channel without bumping a hidden snag. Neighbors stopped asking questions. They could see the truth with their own eyes. Darla kept her distance. Once I saw her at the far end of the cove, clipboard in hand, lips tight. She didn't wave. I didn't either. I didn't need her to agree with me. I only needed the water to stay honest. And it did. The county review came back quiet. Almost polite. A letter with more stamps than sentences. Structure classified fixed. Unauthorized. Corrective action complete. Case closed. That was it. No fanfare, no speeches. Just a decision, tucked neat into a paragraph. I read it twice, then laid it on the table beside the first chalkmark photo. Start and finish, side by side. The whole story in 2 pieces of paper. Elliot stopped by later. He glanced at the letter, then at me. So, he said, guess the tide turned. Guess it did. He poured us both coffee, and we drank it in silence. The good kind. Summer rolled on. The cones rotted on shore. The fake grass frame warped and cracked under the sun. Nobody came to claim them. The dock stood quiet, carrying only its own weight. The flags faded slowly but still marked a line wide enough for anyone to pass. Neighbors started talking about fish runs again, not fines. Kids splashed off the shallows. Darla didn't show her face much. The cabin windows stayed dark, the conduit stripped, the hum gone. It wasn't triumph I felt, just balance. the way things should have been from the start. Some nights I'd sit there with my logbook closed, just listening. The boards creaked their honest tune, the water breathed steady, the willow brushed the tide, no drama. No anchors hiding in the dark, just a lake, free and open. The board never sent another letter, not one. The hearing was their last act, the review their quiet bow. Life went back to its rhythm. Chores, tides, coffee with Elliot now and then. Sometimes I'd catch myself running a hand over the old chalk marks on the pilings, faint and worn away by weather. Proof doesn't last forever on wood, but it lasts long enough. Long enough to remind me that patience wins, silence speaks, and paper carries more weight than noise ever will. The fight had picked me, but the lake had carried me through it. And in the end, it wasn't anger or pride that settled things. It was proof, plain, steady, undeniable proof, the kind the water never forgets.